Activists decry what they call open season on black men by white police. So what's next? This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Brett Baer. Officials in New York City and many other American cities are bracing for another night of protests following a grand jury decision not to indict a white police officer for what's being called the chokehold death of an unarmed African-American man. The rioting that occurred last week in Missouri and other places was replaced last night largely by peaceful demonstrations. But the issues of race and civil rights continue to grow larger and more volatile tonight in more and more communities. We have Fox team coverage. Leland Vittert here in Washington with whether federal investigations into the recent incidents will really make a difference. But we begin with senior correspondent Rick Leventhal in New York tonight with more reaction to the death of Eric Garner. Hi, Rick.
Brett, many people say they were shocked by the grand jury's decision not to seek criminal charges in this case, from Eric Garner's family to politicians to the officer who testified on his own behalf. And tonight, the protests continue with a crowd estimated at more than 1,000 strong gathering down at Foley Plaza in Lower Manhattan near the federal court buildings there. The NYPD on high alert, wondering where this crowd will move next and how much higher tensions will rise.
Cell phone video of the arrest of Eric Garner shows the officer using what appears to be a chokehold to subdue the 6'3", 350-pound man. Garner's death on the sidewalk was ruled a homicide by the medical examiner due to compression of the neck and chest. But a grand jury found no reasonable cause to bring charges against the officer, Daniel Panaleo. And a police union spokesman says it was a textbook takedown known as a seatbelt maneuver taught at the police academy.
If you're speaking, you can breathe. Unfortunately, he died for a number of reasons, and as the grand jury saw and the medical examiner said, it was not a chokehold that killed that person. So we feel badly that there was a loss of life. But unfortunately, Mr. Gardner made a choice that day to resist arrest.
Today, the city announced a complete retraining of every officer in the nation's largest police department.
We're changing how our officers talk with residents of the city, giving officers a chance to wait until backup and supervision comes, de-escalating, using less force.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton weighed in.
Despite all the progress we've made together, African Americans, most particularly African American men, are still more likely to be stopped and searched by police, charged with crimes, and sentenced to longer prison terms.
We want a public trial.
The grand jury's decision not to indict sparked protests across the nation. And since the proceedings are secret in New York, the testimony and evidence may never be revealed. But a state Supreme Court judge agreed to release limited details based on a request from the DA. We now know the Garner grand jury sat for 9 weeks and heard 50 witnesses, 22 of them civilians, the rest police officers or medical professionals. There were 60 exhibits entered into evidence, including 4 videos, autopsy photos, and training records. Attorney General Eric Holder says all of the evidence will be re-examined in the Justice Department's civil rights investigation.
It will be an exhaustive and fair investigation, and we will reach our own independent determinations as to who, if anybody, should be charged.
Attorney General Holder says the civil rights case will proceed as expeditiously as possible. The retraining of New York police officers has already begun. Brett?
Rick Leventhal live in New York. Rick, thank you. Government officials are trying to placate the African-American communities in these situations by promising federal civil rights probes into the Michael Brown and Eric Garner deaths. At least that's the word from one official. But will those investigations actually accomplish anything? Tonight, correspondent Leland Vittert looks at what history tells us.
Federal civil rights investigations have been launched in 3 of the most high-profile deaths of unarmed African Americans in Ferguson, Missouri, Staten Island, New York, and Sanford, Florida.
I don't think the Justice Department should be used, as a political tool to placate local communities if they don't like the result of a particular case.
Former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Robert Driscoll oversaw the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division and says investigations into the deaths of Michael Brown in Ferguson and Trayvon Martin in Sanford are impossible cases to bring such charges on. Criminal civil rights charges require proof of intent, Even the death of Eric Garner in New York represents a problem for a federal prosecution, despite the video evidence.
It's a very tough case because mere negligence isn't enough. A mere mistake by the officer isn't enough.
In both the Ferguson and New York cases, critics say Attorney General Eric Holder's role is about more than justice.
This is part of this pattern of Eric Holder politicizing the department and politicizing the decisions.
A far different standard applies to civil rights investigations of entire police departments, like the findings announced today against the Cleveland force.
Well, I think the reality is that there are problems in the force here that have been identified by the work that has been done by the Civil Rights Division as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office here.
Justice Department supervised reforms are now underway in Cleveland and a number of other cities across the country. Critics say federal criminal investigations often have a perverse effect on community expectations of swift charges when the end result is politics rather than justice. Brett.
Leland, thank you. Overseas tonight, an arrest in the stabbing death of an American teacher in Abu Dhabi. The Interior Minister of the United Arab Emirates says the female attacker also planted a bomb outside the home of another American. The device was disarmed. Terrorists are threatening to kill another American hostage in the Middle East, while Russia's fiery leader is blaming the West for his country's escalating problems. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry looks at the latest foreign policy challenges for President Obama tonight.
Aides to President Obama revealed today he authorized a secret mission to try and save American journalist Luke Summers, as a new video showed a terrorist from al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or AQAP, declaring Summers will be killed unless unspecified demands are met.
Regrettably, when the operation was executed, Luke was not present. Though hostages of other nationalities were present and they were rescued.
Back on November 25th, U.S. and Yemeni forces rescued 6 Yemenis, a Saudi and an Ethiopian. Though today, Ernest said the details are still classified, so he could not discuss whether the president's authorization of the mission was delayed, possibly enabling AQAP to move Summers, amid signs the administration is having as much difficulty battling AQAP in Yemen as it is in taking on ISIS terrorists in Iraq and Syria.
They share with ISIS not only this radical Sunni demographic, but a professed intent to destroy Western and American targets.
Pressed today on whether the focus on airstrikes in Yemen has failed, White House aides insisted the president's approach has been sound.
How can it be considered a success story for the president when this kind of violence continues?
I don't think those are the words that I used. I think that the way that we talked about Yemen is that it has served as a useful template for a strategy that has effectively taken the fight to AQAP in a way that has degraded their ability to hurt the United States of America.
In fact, it was just over 2 months ago when Ernest held Yemen up as an example of the president taking decisive action against terrorists.
How can you cite as a success Yemen when the country's fallen apart?
We have seen the effective deployment of a counterterrorism strategy that involves building up the capacity of local forces, on occasion backed by American military forces.
Another major foreign policy headache for the president continues to be Russia, as Vladimir Putin gave a grand State of the Union speech today attacking the West and actually defended the annexation of Crimea on religious grounds, claiming it's as sacred as Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
No one will succeed in achieving military superiority over Russia.
The president yesterday said he was more optimistic about battling ISIS than getting Putin to change.
He has been improvising himself into a nationalist, backward-looking approach to Russian policy that is scaring the heck out of his neighbors and is badly damaging his economy.
The person dealing with all these crises is the new Secretary of Defense, who will be announced by the president here at the White House tomorrow. Barring some dramatic change overnight, it will be Ash Carter, known as a brilliant physicist, but he will have to get up to speed on warfighting fast. Brett?
Ed Henry, live on the North Lawn. Ed, thank you. So what do you think? Do you think Russian President Putin has outmaneuvered President Obama so far? Let me know at facebook.com/BrettBaerSR or on Twitter @BrettBaer. Use the hashtag special report. Send us something good. We may use it a little later in the panel. Up next, congressional Republicans take their first formal step to fight President Obama's immigration actions. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. KTVU in Oakland, California, with police and social services starting a massive clean out of what may be the nation's largest homeless encampment. The square mile area of San Jose is known as the Jungle. At one time, more than 200 people were there. Fox 11 in Los Angeles, where heavy rains continue to cause flooding and mudslides. 14 people were rescued from their vehicles in Riverside County. No injuries were reported. Roads around the flooded areas are now being closed. And this is a live look at Orlando, Florida from Fox 35, our affiliate there. The big story there tonight, the scrubbing of this morning's planned launch of the new Orion spacecraft. Wind gusts and sticky fuel valves are being blamed. NASA will try again tomorrow to conduct the unmanned test flight. The Orion is the ship that is supposed to eventually take humans to Mars. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.